Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the Uyghur scope, the Uyghur obnoxious scope video from yesterday regarding Venezuela. Unfortunately, things are not going well over there, and I just wish the best for everyone. I hope that there is not a protracted war, or hopefully no war at all. But it's looking pretty bad. In any case, we're going to talk about a different topic today. So please first like, share, and subscribe to the video. Subscribe to me on BitChute so that you can get my updates and new videos immediately. That way you don't have to depend on YouTube, who, by the way, are also shaving user subscribers from me every time. It's just ridiculous. So let's get into this. I think I can get this done within 20 minutes, but we'll see. Bernie Sanders is largely regarded as, kind of the typical Jewish politician. In many ways, he's culturally very similar to a lot of other Jewish politicians. But you have to kind of take this into perspective, okay? I think that I'm Jewish, but I think that there is an overrepresentation in the political sphere because a lot of these people, they just seem to have just like common policies between them, whether it's Schumer or Dianne Feinstein. And, back in the day, we had Howard Metzenbaum, who I think was from my home state of Ohio. That was a long time ago, by the way. I just personally feel that you shouldn't have communities where people just have the same mindset on so many issues, and it has nothing to do with core ideas that are essential to that community. And that's what's happened with Jewish American politicians. And that's why I don't really believe I'm going to get a career where I'm actually running for political office. It just wouldn't be something that I think I could do because I don't really want to have to be in any of these organizations. And if the landscape changes and there's more freedom, I don't know, maybe, but I really don't think so. In any case, why is it Bernie Sanders is taken to be such a symbol of the Jewish people among so many of his followers? It's really just because he's superficially very Jewish. He is from Brooklyn. He does have like a thick accent and a lot of the mannerisms. People rightly say that he's very similar to Larry David. This weekend, this friend of mine was constantly doing the Bernie Sanders, Larry David impression. It's funny until it kind of gets old because the guy's just he's just a joke. And if you go throughout the country, a lot of there's a lot of people who live in the Midwest who don't fit into this stereotype because they're Jewish. But it's useless to complain about stereotypes. The fact is that a lot of people do sound like Bernie Sanders, whether they're in Florida or New York City. But I ran through this and I wrote this article on my personal blog. It's not on Hard News Network because I don't think that it's really a topic relevant to them. And I said that you have a lot of politicians that I think have great ideas, but they couldn't be less Jewish than you have Shiva, if you remember him, Shiva Ayyadurai, who is a Hindu. He's a Tamil Indian, and he was born in India, I believe. And he was running for Senate last year. He's still, I think, one of the greatest kind of iconoclasts in politics right now. But unfortunately, he just can't catch a break. He can't catch a break because of the media landscape, and it's just disgraceful. You have Larry Sharpe, who's also very very good libertarian from New York, who's I don't think he has any religion to my knowledge. He doesn't. Then you have Rand Paul, who's a Presbyterian. Tim Canova, who's I think he might be an atheist. He's Italian. And Donald Trump. And with Donald Trump, I think the religion is very tangential. It doesn't really matter. So a lot of these people, I'll support them. I don't support everything they do, but I think that they're worthy candidates. Bernie Sanders, I think, is not so much. And the real problem is that if you listen to um, his rhetoric and you believe in any way in the Jewish scripture, the Jewish philosophical works, and any of the basic religious principles of Judaism, of traditional Judaism, and not of the modern denominations of Reform and Conservatism, then you realize that Bernie Sanders' values are just they're just transferable to generic progressivism. There's no real unifying factor to them. And it's because he is a Marxist. And I relate this, I did a couple videos already on the ADOS, the American Descendants of Slavery. And I've gotten pushback from the people there. But I think if you're an ADOS out there, you might not agree with my reaction to it. But I should say that I think that they're providing a valuable critique of Kamala Harris. They're providing a valuable critique of a lot of these politicians that claim that they represent the black community. And then people say, well, hold on. Your values don't represent our values. And in fact, your policies don't really give any tangible benefit to black people. And them as voters, the ADOS, who hold those values to be very important to them, they have a point, because when people say to them, well, we represent you, but we're going to fight for illegal immigrants, and then we represent you, and we're going to try to basically, what's another policy that they do? In some cases they'll they'll fight against free college for black Americans or something. There's a lot of I'm not entirely versed on the ADOS grievances against them, but a lot of these politicians, in Harris's case, for example, they're for mass incarceration, or they're for drug criminalization. Okay, so these are areas I think some of the ADOS people, they provide a valuable critique of Kamala Harris, and I'm not. I think it's great that they're doing this. Why be stuck with somebody for the election if during the primary you don't voice all of your objections to them? So this is me voicing my objections to Bernie Sanders. I would say, by the way, I probably will not vote Democrat, but if I was going to vote Democrat, I would vote for Tulsi Gabbard. I think she's really got the right attitude on a lot of things, the right policies on interventionism. I think she would be a good candidate. I think Bernie's really taken the wind out of her sails, but I wouldn't be the only person to say that. So where does Bernie's philosophy come from? Well, socialism. A lot of people say that its root is with Karl Marx, who is from Jewish descent. You should know, though, that Karl Marx's dad, Heinrich Marx, converted to evangelical Protestantism, which is a German sect of. I think they still have a church over there, the Evangelical Church of Prussia or something. So already his parents had drastically departed from Jewish religious practice. Okay, so yes, Karl Marx, by heritage, yes, he did have Jewish parents, both of his parents, in fact, but neither of them were practicing Jews, even when he was before he was born, I believe. So, but yeah, socialism itself actually was not entirely started by Karl Marx. There was Robert Owen, who's in this portrait over here, and those of you that you might say, well, Karl Marx, he's an evil human being and whatever. Karl Marx was certainly, Karl Marx did like promulgate the ideas that I would say are some of the most destructive in human history. But at the time, a lot of people didn't know. I mean, people didn't know at the time that these ideas would cause the problems that they did. Having a bad idea is just that. Having a bad idea does not make you a horrible person. Maybe in his personal life he did things that were not great. I'm not an expert on Karl Marx. This isn't an article about him, but the idea of socialism, the idea of a utopian society, is, at the time, why would you object to it? Because a lot of people were living in horrible conditions. The health, the health of people was pretty bad. I mean, remember, this was the 19th century. People were dying en masse in cholera epidemics of all sorts of different contagious diseases would just destroy entire villages or whatever. This was not a good time to be alive. And it was getting better, but people were trying to find a way to make it better for everybody. So it's not wrong if you live in the 19th century to want to try to make a world that more people can enjoy from. So I don't begrudge people who believed in the vision of Marx at the time, or Robert Owen, or any of these other big socialists, Charles Fourier, and there are a number of other ones. So, that type of philosophy, though, is not in keeping with Jewish tradition. There's this book that I read recently that talks about that, which is where does the progressivism in progressive Judaism come from? It doesn't necessarily come from anything that's rooted in Jewish text. What they've had to do is go back and look through scripture and try to find ways to square the circle, if you may, and put the square peg in the round hole, whatever way you want to phrase it. And it just isn't a congruent fit. Needless to say, it just doesn't work. To Heal the World I have the book right here, and it's pretty good. I don't think it's a book everybody will find interesting, but I did. And I might do like a longer video talking about it. But it really goes into the fact that this idea that many of these progressive Jewish activists, the ones that, if you watch the Red Elephants channel, which I do sometimes, they complain about these quote-unquote rabbis that go to these rallies for immigrants and everything. They don't, in reality, what Vince doesn't take into account is that these people are breaking entirely with Jewish religious practice and belief. Okay, the ideas of tikkun olam, which means healing the world in Hebrew, are kind of a deviationist stream of Judaism. Because we're told that we should help other people. We're not told to just help only people that you know, people in your family, people who are Jewish. You have to. If somebody asks you for help, you're supposed to help them if you can. Sometimes it's debatable. People talk all the time. Should you give money to a homeless person at the train station? Right? It's a real discussion, because they could be addicted to heroin or something. But those discussions are really they're beyond just the scope of the Tikkun Olam vision. The Tikkun Olam vision holds that as Jews, we have to work to create a greater society, in terms of the environment, in terms of racial equality, in terms of gender equality, in terms of rights for sexual minorities, in terms of all of that. None of that stuff comes from anywhere that's before the 80s. Okay, it's a completely new thing. It doesn't have anything to do with 5,000 years of history in Judaism. Okay, which is kind of why I wrote this. See, the ideas that are here are a little more close to Protestantism. Okay, I'm not trying to dump on the Protestants, but a lot of this stuff is just not from traditional Jewish scripture, because the social gospel, which was kind of it was a way for preachers in the late 19th century and early 20th century to reach an audience and say, look, we're going to try to make the world more equal. that was in Protestantism. That kind of seeped into what became Reformed Judaism. They wanted to embrace that type of philosophy because at that time, okay, this might surprise you, but that type of belief system was seen as more American. Okay, it was seen as more American to believe in the social gospel. William Jennings Bryan and some of these other people who were, they were turn of the century Christian preachers. They wanted to distribute the wealth a little more. Okay, you might remember in the 30s, if you learn anything about mass movements of the 30s, there was Father Charles Coughlin. Now he was Catholic, but he was trying very much to fight against hoarding of resources by rich bankers and stuff like that. He happened to be very, very much an anti-Semite, by the way. He hated Jews. Most of his broadcasts were openly hating on Jews. So, that type of stuff about wealth redistribution doesn't necessarily, in many cases, it's hostile to Jews. Okay, that's something people have to remember. You can't just pretend that because of this Tikkun Olam new stuff that this type of thing is from Judaism, because it's not. It's something that comes from Protestantism of the turn of the century. And in fact, nowadays, if you go to a mainline Protestant church like the United Methodist Church or the Presbyterian churches, most of them, if you go to the Lutheran churches, most of them are very similar in their outlook to what you can describe, as a Bernie Sanders type philosophy, as a Reformed Jewish philosophy. There a lot of them are like that. If you go to some Catholic congregations, I forgot what his name is, but there's a guy, there's a priest in Chicago who was kind of close to the Obama campaign in 2008, who has that type of appeal, a very populist left-wing appeal, populist left, redistribution of wealth, that type of thing, strong workers' rights, racial justice. That's their philosophy, and that's a philosophy that I think is contrary to the Jewish teaching. Okay, it does say, and like people who are Jew haters will cite this, but it says in Deuteronomy 7:6, which is the same Bible that if you're a Christian you read to. It says, "For you are a people consecrated to the Lord your God. Of all the peoples on earth, the Lord your God chose you to be God's treasured people." Earlier versions of the type of philosophy proposed by Sanders were rejected by the core leaders of every Jewish generation. So I go into this a bit. I'm not going to read this all word for word, but the festival of Hanukkah is explicitly a festival that contradicts multiculturalism, because Hanukkah happened in the 3rd century BC when there was a conquest by the Seleucid Empire. The Seleucid Empire was one of the 4 Greek fractures of Alexander the Great's empire. So the Seleucids were trying to impose Hellenism on Judea. And, the Maccabeans, the Hasmoneans as they're called, they were rebelling against the imposition of Hellenism. So Hellenism basically held that people who accepted its dictates, they could become, basically this new modern Greek educated person. And many of their precepts were completely against traditional Jewish teaching. For example, they didn't believe in circumcision. They didn't believe in, they would force people to eat pork. So that was a rebellion by the Jewish people at the time against a multicultural religion that was being foisted on them. It was more aggressively multicultural than many of you might think multiculturalism is today, but it's the same idea. But nowadays people have lost the message of Hanukkah, and they've really kind of blended it in with other religious, with other like secular stuff that happens here in the United States. Now, a few other things I go into here. I'm not going to make this video much longer, but the fact is that he attaches much of his Jewish identity to the Holocaust. The Holocaust was a monumental event in Jewish history but having it as the focus of your identity is not productive. There's plenty of other things that happened that we can get around. I mean, we have Passover holiday. We talk about the redemption from Egypt. We talk about, for example, the the airlifting of the Ethiopian Jews out of Ethiopia. We can talk about the Purim holiday when we were in Persia. That was a little prior to before the Hanukkah episodes. So you have to take into account that with all of this history, why do you focus on the worst aspect of it? And indeed, when you look at Sanders' career, when there's other instances when he can speak out against genocide, maybe not necessarily genocide, but horrible oppression, he went to Nicaragua after it was known that the Nicaraguan government is oppressing indigenous tribes on the eastern coast of Nicaragua. He never mentioned that. He never cared to mention that because it doesn't fit in with his concept of what that philosophy is, the philosophy of communism, the philosophy of socialism. He is fine with that because he thinks ultimately they're going to make people's lives better, even as they're trampling the people's entire existence. Okay? He visited the Soviet Union while the Soviets were occupying Afghanistan and intervening in Ethiopia. Ethiopia, by the way, a forced famine over there. So, Bernie Sanders, well, where's his speaking out against injustice when it's countries other than the USA? He doesn't. You can have both. You don't have to support either one. You don't have to cater to the needs of either one. You can say you object to both, and that's not what he did. He went there on official visits as the mayor of Burlington, and he'd like to forget that, but I don't think that we should. So please, read this article. I'll attach it. You have some more stuff about the Great Leap Forward and Norman Finkelstein and some of the, this is something. It's not something I like to talk about because it makes me feel good. Because people are attributing communism and socialism to Jewish people, and it's incorrect. Okay, we have a right to assert our own belief system, and people like Sanders, people like Finkelstein, people like Noam Chomsky, they pervert our heritage. They basically spit on it every time that they talk about their ridiculous values. So other than that, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and also like me or subscribe to me on BitChute and Cocoscope, and I'll talk to you guys later. And we'll probably be having another stream this Sunday. I think I have something in the cards.